The millionaire laughed at the black cleaning lady and said, "So you think you're smart? Then translate it." The room pulsed with malice as Charles's mocking tone set the stage for her public shaming. "But then, so you think you're smart? Prove it by translating this contract into Mandarin for all of us." Charles Wentworth's voice echoed through the marble hall of Wentworth Enterprises, followed by laughter from the executives surrounding him like hyenas waiting for the show to begin. Jada Coleman, 35, stopped cleaning the glass table and looked directly at the billionaire who had just turned her into morning entertainment. Her heart raced, but her gaze was a steel trap, concealing the storm of defiance within. The cleaning cloth was still dripping in her hands, but her eyes revealed a disturbing calm, as if that moment were just another item on a mental list she had been compiling for months. "Take your time," Wentworth continued, adjusting the platinum Rolex on his wrist. His smirk was a weapon, designed to crush her spirit before she could respond. "I know it must be difficult for people like you to understand complex documents." The 15 executives attending the morning meeting laughed louder, some recording the scene with their cell phones, anticipating the viral embarrassment that was to come. Jada had joined the company 2 years ago after her academic life had fallen apart in a brutal way. A magna cum laude graduate in applied linguistics from Yale University with a specialization in legal translation and fluency in 7 languages. She had been promised a brilliant career, articles published in international journals, job offers from embassies, a golden future ahead of her, until a false accusation of plagiarism destroyed everything in a matter of weeks. The professor who accused her, Dr. Nathan Wentworth, Charles's son and current director of international development for the family business, a mediocre man who had plagiarized her work during her master's degree, but who had the cunning to reverse the roles when he realized he would be found out. "Dad always said that diversity is important," Nathan had commented on that fateful day at the university. His words were a venomous barb, dripping with the arrogance of unearned privilege. But some people just don't have the background necessary for this level of academia. The words still echoed in Jada's mind, like a wound that never completely healed. As the billionaire continued his show of humiliation, Jada remembered the nights she spent translating confidential documents that were accidentally left on the tables after meetings. Contracts in Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, languages she spoke fluently, but which they assumed were impossible for a simple black cleaning lady from the suburbs. Each document revealed more pieces of a dark puzzle: systematic overbilling, money laundering disguised as international joint ventures, tax evasion on an industrial scale. For 2 years, she had been the silent witness to crimes that moved $100 million, 0 cents. "Her silence is answer enough," Nathan Wentworth sneered, entering the room with his usual arrogance. His smug grin was a taunt, daring her to crumble under the weight of their scorn. Some people need to know their place in the world. Diversity has its limits, doesn't it? Collective laughter filled the room like a chorus of crows. Edward Larson, the CFO, filmed everything with his iPhone, probably planning to share the comedy in private executive groups. Claire Mitchell, the HR director, watched with a cruel smile, clearly approving of the public humiliation. Then Jada did something no one expected. She took the contract from Charles's hands with deliberately slow movements, quickly scanned the first few pages, and began to speak in perfect Mandarin, her impeccable pronunciation echoing through the room like music in a cemetery. Her voice was a blade, slicing through their mockery with surgical precision. The silence was instant and absolute. "This contract," she said, returning to English with crystal-clear diction, "establishes a joint venture between you and the Chinese corporation Wei Holdings. Interesting how Clause 47 allows them to take majority control if they detect financial irregularities in any American." Charles Wentworth turned pale as if he had seen a ghost. His shock was a crack in his armor, exposing the fear beneath his bravado. That clause was buried on page 187 of a 200-page document written in technical language that few Western lawyers could interpret correctly. "Fascinating coincidence," Jada continued, her voice gaining a confidence that made the air in the room thicker. "I'm sure the Securities and Exchange Commission would be absolutely fascinated to know how you are reporting fictitious revenues from non-existent projects to impress Chinese investors." The cleaning cloth fell to the marble floor with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. From the executives' faces, it was clear that they finally understood they weren't watching a humiliated cleaning lady being put in her place, but someone who had been quietly playing chess while they played checkers with borrowed pieces. Charles opened his mouth to say something, but Jada raised a hand with such natural authority that the billionaire instinctively fell silent. "Oh, and Nathan," she said, looking directly at his son, "that article on syntactic structures in Sino-American legal translations that you published last year. Fantastic work, especially considering that I wrote every comma 3 years before you even knew that field of research existed." Her accusation was a grenade, detonating Nathan's carefully curated facade. If this tale of clever revenge and belated justice is piquing your curiosity about how a public humiliation can turn into the most spectacular downfall Wall Street has ever seen, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happened after that translation destroyed not only fortunes, but reputations that took decades to build. 3 weeks after the translation incident, as Wentworth Enterprises executives had dubbed the episode, Jada Coleman was still cleaning the same marble floors. The weight of their wary glances followed her every move, a silent acknowledgement of her hidden power. The difference was that now everyone looked at her with a strange mixture of distrust and ill-concealed curiosity. Charles Wentworth had spread the word around the company that the pretentious cleaning lady had memorized a few phrases in Mandarin to impress people, an explanation he knew was ridiculous, but which served to keep his authority intact. Nathan, for his part, avoided crossing paths with her in the hallways, as if her presence were a constant reminder of something he would rather forget. What neither of them imagined was that Jada had turned every shift into a meticulously planned intelligence operation. At 6:00 a.m., when she arrived at the almost empty building, she had privileged access to the still unlocked offices of the hurried executives. The trash was a gold mine. Drafts of confidential emails, notes from secret meetings, discarded documents that revealed much more than their authors intended. It was on one of those mornings that she met Thomas Lin, an internal auditor who had been with the company for 15 years. He was working early when Jada came in to clean his office. Unlike the others, Thomas greeted her respectfully and even offered her coffee. "I hear you speak Mandarin," he said, watching her organize the papers on his desk. "My grandmother was born in Shanghai. I've always wanted to learn, but never had the time." Jada noticed something in Thomas's tone, a rare honesty in that environment. Over the following weeks, casual conversations revealed that he too had noticed irregularities in the financial reports, but his attempts to investigate were systematically blocked by Charles. "There's something very wrong with the Singapore subsidiary's numbers," Thomas confided one morning, making sure they were alone. "The contracts I get for auditing don't match the reported revenues. It's like they're two versions of everything." That's when Jada knew she had found her ally. Meanwhile, Charles Wentworth intensified his campaign of subtle humiliation. His relentless taunts were a desperate bid to reassert dominance over the woman who had dared to challenge him. During executive meetings, he made jokes about employees who watch too much YouTube and think they know languages. He instructed Emma, the secretary, to give Jada extra cleaning tasks, always accompanied by disparaging comments about people who don't know their place. Nathan went even further. He began deliberately leaving complex documents in Arabic and Russian on her desk, accompanied by sarcastic notes. "Since you're so smart, how about translating these too?" Each note was a fresh wound, but Jada turned their cruelty into ammunition for her cause. It was his cruel way of testing whether public humiliation had been enough to put her in her place. What he didn't know was that Jada translated every document religiously, discovering details about phantom joint ventures in the Middle East and questionable operations in Eastern Europe. Each of Nathan's provocations turned into more evidence against his own family. The real turning point came when Thomas, gaining confidence in Jada, showed her something that had been tormenting him for months: a flash drive containing backups of all the original financial reports before Charles's revisions. "I kept everything," he whispered, handing her the device. "I knew one day it would be necessary. But if they find out it was me who leaked it." "No one will find out," Jada assured him, her eyes shining with determination. Her promise was a vow, a pact sealed in the shadows of their shared mission. "Do you have a family? A wife and 2 young children? Then leave it to me." When this is over, you'll still have your job. They won't. That night, Jada worked until 3:00 a.m. in her small apartment, cross-referencing data from the translated documents with Thomas's original files. The puzzle was finally coming together. Wentworth Enterprises had created a complex network of shell companies in at least 6 countries, moving $100 million, 0 cents, through fictitious contracts and declaring non-existent revenues to attract Chinese investors. Even more devastating, she discovered that Nathan had used his position at the university to academically validate some of these fraudulent operations, writing technical opinions that lent scientific credibility to his father's schemes. Jada's plan had 3 phases. The first was almost complete: gather irrefutable evidence. The second would involve contacts she had cultivated during her years at Yale, investigative journalists and federal prosecutors she knew from her days when her future was promising. But the third phase was her personal masterpiece. A week before the Chinese investors were scheduled to visit to finalize the $250 million 0 cents deal, Jada did something that surprised even Thomas. She volunteered to help organize the event. Emma nearly choked on her coffee when she received the request. "You want to work extra?" she asked suspiciously. "I need the money," Jada replied with studied simplicity, "and you'll need all the help you can get with the international guests." Charles personally approved the request, seeing a perfect opportunity for further humiliation. "Let her work then," he said, laughing. "It'll be interesting to see how she behaves around real Chinese people." What Charles couldn't imagine was that Jada had spent the last 2 weeks in direct contact with Wei, the CEO of the Chinese corporation, through emails written in perfect Mandarin, not as an anonymous cleaning lady, but as an independent consultant specializing in international compliance concerned about irregularities that could compromise the investment. Her covert communications were a masterstroke, weaving a trap the Wentworths couldn't escape. As she polished the marble floors of Wentworth Enterprises on the eve of the most important event in the company's history, Jada smiled discreetly. In her pocket, her cell phone vibrated with confirmation messages. Everything was ready. Charles and Nathan Wentworth were about to discover that underestimating a black woman with a PhD in linguistics and a thirst for justice had been the biggest strategic mistake of their privileged lives. Their impending downfall was a symphony she had composed in silence, note by devastating note. But would they realize in time that the simple cleaning lady had not only their careers in her hands, but also complete control over the narrative that would unfold the following day? And what would happen when they discovered that she wasn't playing chess alone, but commanding a game in which they didn't even know they were mere pawns? The Grand Crystal Hall of Wentworth Enterprises had never received such an important delegation. Wei and his 5 executives occupied the main table, while Charles Wentworth presented the final figures of the $250 million 0 cents deal with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned. "As you can see, our growth in the Asian market has been exponential," Charles declared, pointing to colorful charts. "The partnership with you will represent the next level of our global expansion." Nathan smiled arrogantly as he watched Jada serve coffee to the guests. For him, it was the perfect image, the pretentious cleaning lady finally in her place. That's when Wei did something completely unexpected. He stood up and walked directly toward Jada. "Ms. Coleman," he said in perfect Mandarin, causing the room to fall silent, "I would like you to explain the discrepancies you identified in the financial reports." The room froze, as if Wei's words had shattered the illusion of Wentworth invincibility. Charles's face drained of color. Nathan dropped his pen, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Jada straightened up, her posture completely transformed. She was no longer the invisible cleaning lady, but a confident professional who had orchestrated this moment with surgical precision. "Mr. Wei," she replied in fluent Mandarin, "as we discussed in our previous communications, I have identified at least 12 serious irregularities in the documents submitted for review." Charles stammered. "She doesn't have the authority to—" "Silence," Wei ordered. "Continue, please." Jada activated the projector, replacing Charles's graphics with her presentations. The first image showed 2 versions of the same report, one with inflated numbers and one with actual data. The Singapore subsidiary reported revenues of $80 million, 0 cents, in the last quarter, Jada explained. Internal documents show actual revenues of only $31 million, 0 cents. A difference of $49 million, 0 cents, in false statements. Nathan tried to intervene. That's invasion of privacy. She doesn't have access to those documents. Jada smiled calmly. For 2 years, you deliberately left confidential documents on your desks, assuming that a mere cleaning lady would not be able to understand them. The second projection showed contracts in Russian and Arabic with accurate translations. These documents reveal a network of shell companies in 6 countries created to launder money and simulate non-existent revenues. And you can prove their authenticity, asked Wei. Absolutely. Jada connected her cell phone to the audio system. Charles's voice echoed through the room. The problem is that the Chinese are very detail-oriented. If they find any inconsistencies, the deal will fall apart. We need to doctor the numbers before sending the final report. The recording was a guillotine, severing the Wentworth's last shred of credibility. Charles tried to approach her. That was taken out of context. Thomas Lin entered carrying a box of documents. The audit Ms. Coleman requested has been completed. All the original documents are here, including backups of the reports before the changes. Nathan exploded. Trader, you've worked for us for 15 years. I did, Thomas corrected. My resignation letter is on your desk, along with a report for the SEC. Ada projected the final piece of evidence. Emails in which Nathan instructed universities to academically validate the fraudulent operations using his position as a doctor to lend credibility to the schemes. Not only did you defraud investors, Jada said, looking at Nathan, but you corrupted academic institutions to legitimize your crimes. Wei discreetly called an assistant who began photographing all the documents. Wei Holdings has a strict policy against fraud. We would like to offer you a position as compliance director for our U.S. operations. I accept, Jada replied with dignity, but first, one last observation. She turned to the Wentworths. You spent 2 years humiliating me, assuming that a black woman wouldn't have the intelligence to understand your operations. But every time you underestimated me, you gave me access to more evidence. Charles tried a desperate ploy. No one will believe the word of a former cleaning lady. Wei smiled coldly. Miss Coleman is not a former cleaning lady. She is an expert with a PhD in linguistics from Yale. We verified her credentials before our first conversation. Flashbulbs popped as journalists recorded the Wentworth's implosion. 2 federal agents entered the room. Charles and Nathan Wentworth, announced an agent. You are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Charles shouted, This can't be happening. We're the Wentworths. His cry was a futile gasp, drowned by the weight of Jada's meticulously crafted justice. Jada watched silently, her expression serene in contrast to the chaos. 2 years of humiliation had turned into absolute justice. But was the Wentworths' arrest just the beginning of the transformation Jada had planned for that company? And what other revelations were still hidden in the files she had collected during months of silent investigation? 6 months ago, Jada Coleman adjusted her haute couture blazer and looked out the window of the 40th floor of what was now called Coleman Way International Holdings. The panoramic view of Chicago had never looked so sweet. The transformation had been radical. Under her leadership as Chief Global Compliance Officer, the company had not only survived the scandal, but thrived in extraordinary fashion. Chinese investors, impressed by her integrity and competence, had expanded their investment to $400 million, 0 cents, creating one of the largest Sino-American partnerships in the industry. Thomas Lin, now promoted to Chief Financial Officer, knocked on her door with quarterly reports. The numbers are spectacular, Jada. 340% growth in international operations, 0 audit irregularities, and, he smiled, we've just been named Most Ethical Company of the Year by Forbes and the former owners. What about them? Asked Jada, unable to hide her satisfaction. Charles Wentworth was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud and money laundering. He lost everything, mansions, yachts, Swiss bank accounts. He's serving his sentence in a medium-setting prison in Nevada. Thomas flipped through a few pages. Nathan got it even worse. In addition to 12 years in prison, he lost his doctorate and was banned from all American and European universities. I hear he's now teaching private English lessons online to make ends meet. The irony was delicious. The man who had destroyed Jada's academic career, out of prejudice, now depended on online classes to pay the rent on a one-bedroom apartment. Emma Carter, the arrogant former secretary, had been fired for complicity in the fraudulent schemes. She was currently working as a receptionist at a dental office, earning a third of what she had earned before. "There's something you need to see," Thomas said, handing her a business magazine. On the cover was a photo of Jada with a headline, "From Cleaning Lady to CEO, Wall Street's Smartest Revenge." The 8-page article told the whole story, from her public humiliation to the spectacular downfall of the Wentworths. The article described her as one of the most respected executives of the new generation, who proved that intelligence and integrity always went out over arrogance and prejudice. That afternoon, Jada visited her old neighborhood for the inauguration of the Coleman Educational Center, a 3-building complex she had financed to offer free language and job training courses to the community. "Jada has always been special," said Danya Marcia, her former neighbor, emotionally. "When she cleaned offices, I knew it was temporary. People like her are born to lead, not to serve." More than 200 people attended the event. Young Black and Latino men approached her to take pictures, seeing her as proof that it was possible to break down seemingly insurmountable barriers. "My journey proves that our greatest revenge against prejudice is success," Jada told the crowd. "Every time someone tries to diminish us because of our color, origin, or gender, we must transform that energy into fuel to go further than they ever imagined possible." Wei, who had flown in from China especially for the event, announced a surprise. Wei Holdings will allocate $25 million for scholarships in translation and international law for students from disadvantaged communities. "We're calling it the Jada Coleman Program because we believe that exceptional talent exists everywhere, it just needs an opportunity." That night, in her penthouse apartment on the Upper West Side, Jada received an unexpected call. It was Charles Wentworth calling from prison. "Jada," his voice was broken, defeated. I just wanted to say that you were right about everything." "I'm sorry I underestimated you, Charles," she replied calmly. "You didn't underestimate me. You despised me out of pure prejudice. There's an important difference, I know. And now, I'm paying the price. My family has lost everything. My friends have abandoned me." "You've won completely." "No," Jada corrected him. "I didn't win. I won against myself. I turned your humiliation into fuel for my success." That's the difference between revenge and justice. After hanging up, Jada gazed at the city lights through the window. On her desk, 3 job offers awaited her response, one from the UN, another from the White House, and a third to head a new international consulting firm. 2 years ago, she was cleaning floors and treated as invisible. Today, multimillionaire executives were competing for her attention and expertise. Her rise was a blazing testament to the power of resilience over oppression. There was no sweeter revenge than genuine success, built with intelligence and integrity. The real lesson of Jada Coleman's story was not about destroying enemies, but about turning obstacles into opportunities. Charles Wentworth tried to humiliate her because he believed that a Black woman's place was serving coffee, not running companies. His prejudice was a shackle one Jada shattered with every calculated move. What he didn't know was that every attempt to diminish her only strengthened her determination to prove that talent has no color, gender, or social origin. The best revenge is not destroying those who hurt you, but building something so great that they realized they were never a match for your true potential. Jada turned 2 years of humiliation into a lifetime of success, and that is a victory no one can take away from her. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes our greatest defeats are just the prologue to our most spectacular victories.